Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Quiz Marketing Podcast. My name is Josh Hanum. I'm the co founder and CEO at Interact. Today, I am welcomed by a very special guest, Erin McGoff. Erin is a creator and the founder of Advice with Erin, has a very cool quiz, and I'm super excited to talk about that. But thanks for being here, Erin. I appreciate it.
Hi, Josh. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So, I'm going to jump in and I gave you a list of questions, but I'm going to go in reverse order. So, if you want to tell the audience what your results have been with your quiz, because I think it's pretty astounding what you've done. Let's start there and then we can work backwards to talk through like how you came up with it and all that kind of good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, creating this quiz is one of the best things that I did for lead generation for my email newsletter. So I wanted to expand my newsletter, but I also wanted to provide a lot of value to my audience. So I wanted to create a career aptitude quiz, a free one, and I did it. And it's been amazing. I doubled my newsletter size in a matter of 4 months, I think. And people have found a ton of value through it. I think I'm at 100 and almost 200,000 newsletter subscribers now, and my retention rate is awesome. Everybody's really happy with it, and that's pretty much all thanks to this quiz. Yeah.
Wow, that's really incredible. We go back to the beginning. How did you even come up with that idea? I mean, career aptitude tests have been around for a long time, but yours is really unique, and we'll obviously link to it so people can check it out. But how did you even get the idea of doing that?
It's a good question. So one thing that I've noticed through giving advice, career advice to over 6 million people on the internet is this one thing kept coming up, which I call career confusion. It's basically just when
Hmm.
people don't really know what they want to do with their life, or maybe they're in a job and they just don't really like it, but they don't know what else to do. This is like a very, very common feeling that most people have. So I wanted to create a quiz that was unlike other career aptitude quizzes. So up until this point, I had been recommending career aptitude quizzes to people. These are basically quizzes that you could take online that tell you like what your strengths and weaknesses are and what kinds of careers might be a better fit for you. I've taken all of them. I spent tons of money, some of them were free, some of them cost money, and I would take them. And there were a couple that I liked, but for the most part, I felt like they were either too vague or mostly just outdated. They just weren't really hip to the modern times. And so I thought, what if I just created my own and it was 100% free? And so I spent a few months. Actually, I spent a lot of time designing this quiz. It was a ton of work. And I designed my own 6 profiles and 30 questions. And then the trick with mine, though, is that I highly encourage people to take it with somebody who knows them sitting next to them. Because I find that with a lot of career aptitude quizzes or anything, the Myers Briggs quiz, anything like that that's personality based, people aren't very self aware. And that's okay. That's just kind of how humans are. I probably think I'm more self aware than I am. And so it's really nice to have somebody sitting next to you who actually knows you really well. So when you're about to click, strongly agree or disagree to a question, they're like, no, that's not you. And that can help yield better results from your quiz. So anyway, yeah, I wanted to create this career aptitude quiz that would provide a lot of value to my audience and help introduce them to careers that not only fit like their strengths and weaknesses, but also their personality and their lifestyle preferences. That was a really big thing for me.
That's cool that you recommend that. That's something that's really funny that we found over the years is people often do have someone sitting next to them, or they'll spend just a crazy amount of time answering the questions. It's not really crazy. I mean, it's like a serious thing figuring out your career in this case, but it's just shocking to me like how seriously people do take quizzes. So it's great that you thought it through like to that level and actually put all that effort into it because I'm sure people on the other end are spending a lot of time going through the quiz. When you were thinking about those 6 profiles, that was a question that I had was how are you making 6 profiles that are, career recommendations that capture everybody, but also help people in a more specific way? Because that's always like a tricky thing.
Yes, it is definitely tricky. I have been exchanging DMs with thousands, millions of people for years now. So I have a really good feel. I kept seeing these archetypes pop up over and over again of different types of people in the industries. And so what I did was I just spent weeks and weeks and weeks, like literally in my notebook, just like writing down what I was seeing over and over again. And I came to the conclusion that there are these 6 kind of profiles. It's structured professional, independent professional, hands-on professional, moneymaker, creative, and passionate professional. Everyone that I could think of in my life fit into one of those six categories. So then once I had those six categories, I could work backwards from there and pepper all of these questions with hints of each of those six so that whatever somebody answered, it kind of went into this algorithm. And that was certainly the hardest part because creating questions is really, really difficult because every little word can change the meaning of it. So I did a ton of beta testing with strangers, but also a lot of family and friends, and just asking them to give me feedback on, how did you read this question? And I actually came to the conclusion that it helped to have like the prompt for the question, but I would also give an example. So if it was like, I prefer to work at home, or if it was like, I prefer to work alone rather than with people, the little quote would be like, I'd rather sit on my couch with my laptop than be in a bougie office with a view. So it'd be like a little bit more specific. And, it can be hard people can sometimes read into these questions. Like you said, they can take a lot of time. But yeah, having those six archetypes that it all funneled down to, that was really the starting point.
Yeah, and I can see in the way that you built out those archetypes, it's not necessarily like it's specific, but not specific in the sense of like, oh, you should be a nurse. Maybe I think you do have some kind of connections back to specific jobs, but you did a good job there of making it where it's specific, but also general. There's some
Mm-hmm.
psychological principle, I forget what it's called, that like encapsulates that, where it's like be specific, but also general. So people feel seen and heard, but also not necessarily like, oh, this is too prescriptive because doesn't seem like people generally like to be told exactly what to do. They want more kind of like a recommendation. So that seems perfect. And then the questions, that was my next question, is about the questions because my goodness, over the last 12 years, I've had so many conversations with people, almost all of which revolve around the questions and asking those questions. And I'm glad that you mentioned it's really hard to do. So you said a couple of things there that stood out to me: beta testing with strangers and also family and friends. What did you learn in those rounds of beta testing? Like, what kind of feedback were you getting on the questions? Anything that surprised you there?
Yeah, I think some of the questions, it was like everybody would say yes to this. So, like, one of the questions, for example, was like, I think it's the second question. It's, I want to make more money than my peers, even if I don't admit it out loud. And like, all of my family and friends were like, of course. Like,
Mm.
who's going to say no to that? And so that would make me think, like, oh, duh. That's not a good question because it doesn't weed out a lot of people. So I had to reword it, to be like, making more money than my peers is extremely important to me, even if I don't admit it out loud. Because then it's like a more extreme take. So then people might be more, so I have the four options: strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then it might lead people to be a bit more polarized about how they answer that instead of making it something that most people would agree or most people would disagree with.
That I hadn't really thought about that, but that's a really good point. Just the changing the tone of it. Like, I, yeah, I forget the word that you actually use, but it's like it takes it to an extreme where it's
It
like,
polarizes
this
it.
is,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, polarized. That's a good word. I hadn't thought about that. I'm going to add that to our guides. If that's cool. Um, so what about now? Like, are you thinking this is going to be kind of a flagship quiz for you, or are you thinking about expanding into like more subtopic quizzes, things like that?
I would love to continue to expand the quiz. I mean, my goal one day would be to provide people with even more resources. If somebody gets structured professional and they see that, software engineering is a good job for them and they're good at math and they don't mind sitting in front of a computer all day and they want to make a lot of money, I would love to then pair them with a course that they could take, and make a commission off of that education platform that takes that person in. And I would love to be able to monetize it more, to be honest. This quiz is completely free. I lost money making this quiz. What I gain is newsletter subscribers, which my newsletter isn't even fully monetized yet. So it's really
Mm.
just something I'm doing for fun at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I love the value that the quiz is providing and is my most popular product. My second most popular product is a free salary negotiation guide, which is fantastic and has helped people negotiate their salaries. But I think something that people really love about the quiz is just the interaction. And who doesn't want to take a quiz? We're all so obsessed with ourselves. Who don't, we all want to learn more about ourselves. And so it's a very tangible thing. And something else is that it is free. So you can take lots of career aptitude tests online, but they're not really attached to a face or a brand, or maybe they cost $200, or maybe they're attached to some decades old psychology rubric, and there's some corporate lingo in it. Mine feels very fresh. It feels very new. It's attached to my brand. So I think I'm really happy that it's providing a lot of value. And I'm also gaining a ton of insight on my following. I recently added in 3 demographic questions in the beginning. I wish I did that when I first created the quiz. But I just did it, and I'm learning so much about who's taking the quiz.
That's another good point, and something that we definitely encourage folks to do is add those questions in, because if it is a truly engaging topic, it's something that people actually want to know the answer to, like they want to figure out their answer at the end of the quiz, they're willing to answer those demographic questions, and then you can figure out who's in the audience. I remember I interviewed someone who started a beauty brand, and she realized that her audience was like a decade older than she thought. So then she's like, wow, all of my graphics are wrong, all of my like models that I'm using are wrong, because I'm showing young people, but my audience is actually older. So that's really key. Um, so in terms of like moving forward from here, you mentioned a couple times like monetization, further products. I was curious in general, like just in the creator space, and maybe have an opinion on this, but moving folks from social follower to an email list. This is obviously one of the ways to do it. I personally think it's the best way to do it. But you've done it very successfully. What was the reasoning behind deciding to do that now? Like build up the email list and invest in that? And what would you say to other creators that are in that space where they have a lot of followers on socials, but maybe haven't started investing in email yet?
Absolutely. Email lists are a great thing to invest in. One, because they're relatively low lift, and two, because you entirely own them. So when you're a creator, you're renting out your platform. Like we just saw with TikTok. TikTok just went away overnight, and I know people who lost over 10 million followers in a second. So we are borrowing, we are renting space on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok, and they can go away tomorrow. Your account can get like randomly banned. It's so risky to not diversify. And email newsletters are one of the most fantastic ways. You have a direct input to people. People check their email something like 400 times a day. People are always checking. It's a direct line to your audience. For me, it made a lot of sense because I give advice. So every Tuesday night, I sit down with a glass of wine and I write my little, it's probably like a 500-word piece of advice. It's just something that I'm thinking about. I put 3 headlines in there that have to do with the job market and the economy. I add a fun little statistic. I add one communication tip, and that's it. Like rarely, sometimes I'll do a little ad. But right now, I'm really focused on providing value. I really am a believer in providing value first, and then the people will follow you. I think when people immediately try to monetize things or oversell to people immediately, it can kind of break down on that trust. And when you're giving advice, you need to build a lot of trust with people first. So, I mean, this has been an extraordinary funnel for me. I'll post an Instagram reel. I use the ManyChat keyword automation, which integrates very nicely. It sends them the interact quiz, and then the email is captured and stored. And I use ConvertKit to do it. So it's a great funnel. It's been extraordinarily successful, as you said.
Yeah, that's like such a good funnel, and I think it's kind of a new thing. We started, like I said, 12 years ago. So back then, that wasn't really a primary funnel. This was the funny days of social media. That was back when people shared things on their walls and whatnot. So the quizzes would always start somewhere else and then get shared out onto social. Now it's almost flipped, where it's like you'll do a reel, the reel goes to ManyChat, ManyChat goes to Interact, then you get the email, then you have the conversation from there over email. Yeah, so it's totally different. And it's funny how things have changed, but yeah, you're one of the ones that have really figured it out. So hats off to you for figuring out that funnel and getting that really dialed in. I think it's a great example, and we'll link it in the comments, like I said, because if anybody is thinking about how do you move that audience over from socials to email, something that you own, something that you can build up over time that no one can take away from you. I mean, I don't know if there's any way to actually deplatform somebody if they have an email list. That's extremely valuable. And I like that your approach is to build value, build value, build value, and then potentially monetize in different ways that contribute to adding more and more value over time,
Exactly.
rather than like, there's it's kind of two camps of folks on the internet, right? It's like there's the go in and sell right away and make as much money as possible. And then there's folks where it's like, nah, we got to add value for a really long time and then figure out how products can fit into that and not be like this separate thing that we do. So that's
Yeah,
really,
that's the long game for sure, and that's definitely the game that I'm playing. And like you said, like I only do ads in my newsletter that are relevant. I love like linking to educational resources, how to upskill in AI or, different types of career resources and not just throwing them some random ad, but something that will continue to provide value. And can I tell a story of how I found Interact?
yeah,
Because I think that'd be really helpful for folks.
yeah,
So when
yeah.
I first decided to make a quiz, I didn't actually know about Interact. I went to Upwork and I found a quiz engineer, somebody who could make me a quiz, paid them money, and they wanted to use, I don't know what it was, Typeform maybe or something else, and then create a Zap through Zapier that went to ConvertKit, and you had to build a custom API. It was extremely complicated, and I had to pay for Zapier and Typeform, which were both really expensive. And it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster. We launched it, and within 24 hours, we reached the max. And for some reason, the software that we were using, I think it was something else. It wasn't Typeform at that point, but I'm blanking on the name of the website.
I think it was
Um,
Jotform because I remember we talked
it
about
was job form.
that.
Oh my gosh, it was job form. They had this awful customer service. I maxed out and they wouldn't let me upgrade because to upgrade I had to go to the enterprise model because my reel was going viral with my quiz. Everyone wanted to take my quiz. It was like 10,000 people like within a few hours. It was insane. It totally crashed. And I was losing leads by the second because Jotform reached maximum and they had no customer service to talk to, and I'd have to wait until the next business day to call their enterprise team. Oh my gosh, it was completely awful. So I did. The next day, I called their enterprise team, and some 24-year-old sales guy picks up. He condescendingly talks to me like I'm not big enough for the enterprise model. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I'll pay you whatever you want. Like, I am big enough, trust me. And he basically shrugs me off. Then you emailed me. I don't even know how you saw it, but I was complaining on my story about Jotform and how I was trying to get people this quiz, but it wasn't working anymore. And you were just like, I'll build your quiz. Like, just, I'll do it. And you got it done. And the quiz was back up and running. And it was amazing. You completely came in and saved the day. And not only saved the day, but I no longer had to pay for Zapier and Jotform. I just had to pay for Interact. And Interact talks so nicely to ConvertKit and ManyChat. And I didn't need to build a custom API or anything because you already did all that. And they all work so nicely together. I don't think I've had an issue at all with any of the connections. And that's actually rare for ManyChat. ManyChat doesn't like working with a lot of different softwares, but I don't know what you did on the back end, but it's been very smooth for everybody. I love the analytics. They're way better than Jotforms. Obviously, the customer service, you emailed me personally. So I couldn't recommend it more. I wish I used Interact in the first place and I didn't explore these other ones because I could have made this quiz myself too. I didn't need to hire somebody.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear. And I mean, we've felt that pain so many times. Our side of that story goes back to like 2014, I think. Red Lobster signed up and made a quiz with us, and our platform kept crashing, and it was a horrible experience. And so Matt, my co-founder, just really over-indexed on making things stable and making the integrations work. And so from day one, it's like over 50% of our product is actually those integrations and the stability. The software itself, like the quiz thing, is not terribly complicated. It's kind of like a fancy form, but those integrations and the fact that it doesn't ever crash is like absolutely vital. So then when I see people sign up, I get alerts, based on some analytics of like how big the person is. I always try to reach out just to make sure, like, okay, we got you covered. Like, we're very familiar with this. We've felt this pain before, so let's make sure this works well for you, because it's horrible. Because you're like, there's
Oh,
literal contacts trying to get on my email list, And it's such a bad experience when
Oh, it's
somebody
awful.
wants to give you their email and they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Like you lose people, and so we've just always ended up. But that's a really cool to hear that story, and cool to hear that that is working because it's like the experience that we want to provide for people. So that's
Yeah.
awesome.
If
That's
yeah, if
awesome.
anybody out there is wanting to make a quiz, I would highly recommend just building it yourself on Interact. Like you don't need to hire anybody. You can just do it yourself. Make something really enjoyable, short and sweet. Mine's 30 questions because I'm really trying to dig deep with people and trying to like unearth things about them that they might not have known. But you can just create a ten question quiz that's super fun. Go back to the old days of BuzzFeed. What fruit are you? It doesn't have to be a whole career aptitude quiz.
Yeah, and I like that you made yours longer because I think it gives people more of a representation of like the freedom that you can have with writing the quiz. You don't have to have it follow like some formulaic thing where it's like, okay, 6 questions and then 3 answers at the end and make it like this. It's like, what does your audience want? And I like that you mentioned that many times right at the beginning, like talking to the audience, listening, looking back through the DMs, journaling, going through the notebook about like, okay, what are the commonalities here? What are people talking about? What are they asking about? Because then you can be confident in launching with 30 questions. And a lot of times I'll talk to people and they're like, oh, is this too long? Will people drop off? Like, there's a lot of fear there, but having that confidence of knowing like I know who my audience is and this is what they want, and now I can write 30 questions with confidence. I think that's a really good example for people to check out. Um, so we're about to come up on time, but where can people follow you and kind of follow along with this, and obviously take the quiz as well? What are the resources they can check out?
Yeah, for sure. So you can follow me on Instagram at Advice with Erin. I'm also on YouTube at Advice with Erin and TikTok at Advice with Erin. My email newsletter is just advicewitherin.com/newsletter or hyperhelpful.com. It's the name of the newsletter. And then to take my quiz, you can just go to advicewitherin.com/quiz because Interact also easily embeds into your website. It was the easiest thing ever. I couldn't believe it. It's like you guys have just thought of everything. And so you can just go there and take the quiz right on my website. It was so easy. And yeah, 30 questions. Maybe you'll get an answer that either validates what you think about yourself or maybe you will surprise yourself. So go take it.
Perfect. And then any closing thoughts for creators or business owners that are thinking about doing a quiz? What's your advice for them?
Talk to other people who have made one first. I wish that I had done that. I just kind of read blogs and watched YouTube videos and typed into Google how to make a quiz and went on Upwork and trusted somebody who did things kind of old school and I didn't know that. So I would like find people like me who are pushing a quiz on social and ask them how they did it and what they would change about how they approached it because that's how you're going to learn the most up-to-date information. And definitely just do it. Yeah, listen to what your audience is asking for over and over again and what their pain points are, and create a quiz that would provide value to them. It's a really low lift for you, but a really high value add for them. So I definitely encourage it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Erin. I really appreciate you being here and sharing all that advice with us. It's super helpful.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All righty.